I appreciate your time, Senator Allen, and I'm going to piggyback on those comments, but I just wanted to say I found this to be a very substantial hearing. I think a lot of very interesting and substantial information came across, and a lot of agreement on issues. I'll start off with 2 points that won't surprise you, Mr. Allen, that are important to me. We need this to be very data-driven, and we often have presumptions in our society, and they don't often pan out. So I sent you an email earlier, but you know, there's the Caltech MIT voter project that was going on for a long while that has studied elections all over the world and have some very substantial data. RAND has some very substantial data. Yes, I think competitive elections, I'll give you one example. I think competitive elections drive out votes. But we have known who the presidential vote would be for in California for a couple of cycles of elections. And people still come out and vote in higher numbers for those elections.
That's true.
So you know, why is that? And I think it's because it's important to do. Okay, and so we need to find out why it's important. There was a lot of agreement on making elections easy, making voting easy. I would say we have to make it trivial. We have to make it completely trivial. And my second point is I think we need to always trust the voter. I don't mind whether you're voting. I don't mind why you're voting. I think that if there are issues out there, when you vote, you are going to make decisions about things that are important to you. And so if we make it completely trivial for you to vote, interesting things will happen to the election process.
When you say trivial, you mean just easy as possible?
As easy as possible. I mean, there is a generation that it really should be voting on this device. Okay, it really should be voting on this. Something's wrong when you request a mail-in ballot and 50% of you still don't vote. You know, you went to the effort to request a mail-in ballot and you didn't actually execute the vote. That means mail-in ballots are not that easy for people. Okay, there's a disconnect somewhere. I think it was a mistake to remove the touchscreen ballots. My bet would be that if we ran a parallel election, you went into an election booth and you could do either the ink spot voting or you could vote on the touchscreen. I think people would be lined up for the touchscreen. Okay, I think we don't really have thought through the issue of what we like about electronic and don't like about electronic. I don't know if we can do mandatory voting, but we have to find a way to get to a culture where everybody feels they ought to vote. Those of us who've been involved in elections have information that, depending on who you talk to, is or is not public, but we know who voted in every election, right? That's how we target,
right.
Okay? So a way of dealing with mandatory voting is just to make people aware that we know if you don't vote. We've actually done that in a couple local elections in Beverly Hills. A little bit of a dicey issue. We had a bond issue and a parcel tax issue, and we're a small community, and we let people know that, you know, we don't know how you voted. We know whether you voted, and our turnouts were high, and we lost the elections anyway, but our turnouts were high. A way of sort of coercing people to vote, if that's an important issue, would be to find a way to publicize names of people who didn't vote. Kind of an iffy issue, but it's interesting, okay? And you're doing it without having made things mandatory. If a lot of people voted, so you saw a lot of consensus here that things need to be very easy to vote. There are two sort of, you know, the barrier to entry to voting. If you looked at any other business in the United States, I don't care whether you're selling a product, whether you're selling a service, whether you're trying to get food to those who are disenfranchised and needy, you always look at the barriers to entry and you try to make it as absolutely simple and easy as possible to avail yourself of your services or get to my product, and we're not doing that with voting. So issue number one is make it completely trivial. And all the ideas here are interesting. Are correct. I mean, multiple days of voting, voting centers. I should be able to vote anywhere in LA County, right? I should be able to walk out of my place of work at lunch and go down and show an ID, and my correct ballot should be presented to me to vote, okay? You're not really going to be able to do that with paper votes. You're going to need some sort of e-voting process to make that happen, and we had that for a very short period of time. there are two marketing issues. There's the marketing issue of getting people to vote, and a lot of time and effort and money we're thinking of putting in getting people to vote. If somehow we could make it mandatory to get to the point of being socially acceptable, a lot of people voted, we wouldn't have to do the guessing of how we get people to vote. The other marketing issue is what every candidate and every proponent of an issue goes through, and that is trying to decide how you market yourself to the voters. If there are a lot of voters out there, that whole issue becomes very, very different, right? Senator Allen, you may or may not have been able to avoid the issue, and I didn't pay that. I paid a lot of attention to your campaign. I don't know whether you particularly addressed the issue as an example of student loans. You probably did, because you come out of the education environment. If we had large numbers of people voting, you would not be able to run for office anywhere without addressing the issue of student loans. And we could pick off issue after issue after issue like that, that once a large number of people are voting, you now have to have a large agenda of issues that you stand for. When I go to buy something now, in the process of buying it, and half the time it's online, okay, as I go to buy it, I get to look up about it. Right? I get to get a Q code or something, and I get to look up, what it is about the TV I want to buy, or what it is about the organic food that I want to buy. If we have electronic voting of some sort, and that's a little bit different than online voting, we're going to be able to add information to the voting process so that you can look at the candidate's name, and then you can also look at what they stand for with one click. Okay, I don't know exactly how that happens, but that'll change the whole process. But I think it's going to end up being online voting. I think you need to be data-driven. I don't know the extent to which you can experiment. Okay, so I will advocate for a position Vice Mayor Mirisch has taken. What if you found a way to allow certain communities that wished to take on the onus of online voting to do it themselves? What if the city of Beverly Hills said, we're going to do online voting for a city council election? Is there a way for you to allow that to happen constitutionally, or could you put legislation forward? Because then you have an experiment. The city of Beverly Hills chose to take it on themselves, and you get to see whether it works. You get data. Otherwise, for issues like online voting, for issues of certain types of e-voting, you have to make all sorts of assumptions before you put them in place. Am I making my point? So if you allowed communities to have some flexibility, some very interesting things could happen. One final issue, and I also have a lot of English family, and they have commented to me that voting is a social experience, and a lot of it occurs after dinner. That's why the whole family will go down and vote after dinner. We've done something a little strange with our stress on the anonymity of the vote. And yes, it's very important that your vote be anonymous, but we've made the voting process a little bit anonymous as well. Okay, and so this idea of voting centers and social voting centers and getting that, and maybe actually, we actually say don't discuss the issues with anybody around the polling place, right? and that doesn't happen in England. As you walk up to your polling thing, you're debating backwards and forwards about how you're going to vote and who's going to vote. So when you set up community voting centers, there needs to be a social experience. It needs to be a social experience talking about the election, talking about the issues and on why I vote. I've got about 10 or 15 people who call me up for all of the less than important elections, and we talk about, and two of them, by the way, I'm pretty sure are asking me how I vote so they can vote the other way. But it's a delicate process. When we have those discussions, there are 3 or 4 people who go, is it okay for me to ask you? That's wrong. That should be positive. It should be a positive dialogue. Absolutely trivial access to voting. Automatic registration, as close to mandatory voting as you can get, and it's got to be electronic somehow. It's just, I go there and I'm taking up too much time, but I go there and I do the ink spot voting and I pull out the card. I can't tell for the card whether I inked the correct things. You know,
Right.
we make a presumption about paper that's okay. When we had touchscreen voting, there was an immediate registration. I actually remember looking through and going, "Oh, that wasn't who I meant to vote for." The feedback was right there. So anyway, I appreciate the hearing. You've got to find a way to make it trivial to vote, just trivial to vote.
I think
a lot happens.
And I think you'll find some of the things that Registrar Recorder Logan is working on right now for the 2020 election have many elements of what you're talking about. I invite you to you get the packet and look at what he's been talking about.